Paris attacks are the third major operation claimed by ISIS in just over 2 weeks. A Russian jetliner blew up over Egypt, killing all 224 on board. U.S. officials say a bomb was the likely cause. Last Thursday, twin suicide blasts in Beirut killed 43. But after Paris, we're in a whole new world, according to Michael Morrell, a former number 2 at the CIA and now CBS News senior security contributor.
I say whole new world for 2 reasons. One is ISIS now has developed an attack capability in the West. They told us that they would do that. They've now done it in Western Europe. They told us that they will do that in the United States. They will eventually do that unless they are degraded. The second whole new world here is the targets they've chosen to attack. People don't sympathize with, but they certainly understand when ISIS attacks a government target or a military target, or even Charlie Hebdo when somebody has defamed the prophet. People understand that. It's much more difficult to understand an attack on our very way of life that sows fear and terror.
It appears at least one of the attackers slipped into Europe in the wave of refugees who fled Syria. The clue is in a passport found near the body of a suicide bomber outside the soccer stadium. Holly Williams picks up the story in Athens.
Greece says this man arrived on its shores claiming to be a refugee on October 3rd and used this Syrian passport, suspected to be a fake, which identifies him as Ahmed al-Mohammed, 25 years old and born in Idlib, northwestern Syria. Yanis Mazalis is the Greek immigration minister.
He didn't have any record?
Nothing at all.
So there was no reason for you to suspect
nothing at all.
That he might be an extremist?
Yes, it was like you and like me, only that he was in a boat with other refugees.
The man carrying the passport crossed to Greece from Turkey, the same route used by over 600,000 migrants this year, many of them Syrian refugees. He didn't appear on any international wanted lists, so he was registered by the Greek authorities, fingerprinted and then allowed to enter Europe.
If someone is clean and is going to be an extremist, this is something that you cannot check it anywhere.
It's long been feared that ISIS could use the flood of refugees to smuggle its fighters into Europe. But Scott, this case seems to show just how easy it is to do so.
Holly Williams in Athens tonight. Holly, thank you.
A man who told police, "I am Syrian, I'm here with 2 others. We were recruited by ISIS and this is an ISIS operation." And
this fake passport was found next to one of the Paris bombers. European authorities now saying at least 8 other Syrian migrants made it there with the same paper.
Despite terror attacks that left more than 100 people dead in Paris last week, France says it will remain a country open to refugees. President Francois Hollande renewed his pledge to accept migrants and refugees on Wednesday, November 18th. The French president spoke before a gathering of France's mayors in Paris. He acknowledged that the events of last week, quote, have sown doubts. However, in the same breath, Hollande added that France had a humanitarian duty to help refugees, but that doing so must go hand in hand with, quote, our duty to protect our people. Hollande said refugees will be subjected to extensive security checks. French mayors gave Hollande a standing ovation after Wednesday's announcement. In September, Hollande announced that his country would welcome in 30,000 refugees over the next 2 years as part of sweeping European Union plans to handle the continent's migrant crisis.
Fake passports, and France granted them refugee status.
You can buy Syrian passports.
Yeah. Where?
Fake. $600 or $700. You can get Syrian passports for you if you want. Give me just a photo and we can bring you one.
Where did you get offered that? Where does that happen? Everywhere?
Everywhere. I think in Syria there are some people doing that.
Migrants managing to break through the police line.
Who would pretend to be a refugee, escaping war and brutality? The answer is Ahmed al-Mohammed. These are his papers, his fingerprints, a Syrian looking for help. He arrived here on October the 3rd. Like thousands on Leros, it took just minutes to take his details. 6 weeks later, he was in Paris, ready to kill.
We are with the French people.
There's anger here at what al-Mohammed did, but also fear over what Europe will do next.
Europe's worried now. People are worried.
I know they're worried, but every single day there's everything happening in Paris happens in our places, in my home. What could I do? Could I stay in my home? No, I can't. I have to go.
But European leaders are nervous. We now know Ahmed al-Mohammed's passport was a fake, and he wasn't alone. He bought these ferry tickets with another man called al-Mahmoud. He's still to be found. And with so many migrants arriving in Greece, police are overwhelmed.
One police source here said they can't check if passports are real or fake, and they have no way of knowing if the information being given to them is real, and that there is nothing to stop any of these people leaving Greece and moving on through Europe.
There is now suspicion who can and can't be believed.
Are you seeing people pretending to be Syrians?
Yes, I see. I see.
This man is from Syria and afraid. He says it's too easy to cross borders.
Check me properly. Ask me one question. What you think? What are you want to do? What's your dream, at least?
Do you think Europe has got it wrong, that more checks should be done?
You must check. For your safety and for my safety.
But whatever does happen next will be too late for those in Paris. A night of terror that will now shape this migration crisis.
Die in diesen Zeiten blühen. Mitten in Istanbul werden gefälschte syrische Pässe angeboten. Karaman Yavuz und Jürgen Kreller über den Handel mit der Hoffnung.
Die Haare glatt nach vorne, jedenfalls nicht zu auffällig. Unser Reporter Karaman Yavuz versucht, wie ein Syrer auszusehen. Wir gehen in Hamburg zum Fotografen und fliegen mit dem Passfoto in die Türkei nach Istanbul. Eine Zwischenstation für viele Flüchtlinge. Der Aksaray-Platz. Hier warten wir auf unseren Kontaktmann. Er hat uns am Telefon versprochen, dass er einen gefälschten syrischen Pass besorgen kann. Viele Flüchtlinge hoffen, mit einem Ausweis aus dem Bürgerkriegsland bessere Chancen auf Asyl zu haben, etwa in Deutschland. Der Mann will nicht gedreht werden. Er verschwindet mit dem Foto irgendwo im Gewirr einer Nebenstraße. Dort wird er sich mit dem Fälscher treffen.
Mein Kontaktmann wollte in 3 Stunden mir einen syrischen Ausweis bringen. Ich bin gespannt, ob es ihm gelingt.
Hier sammeln sich Menschen aus Syrien, Afghanistan und Irak. Alleine in Istanbul leben geschätzt mehr als 200.000 Flüchtlinge. Viele wollen weiter nach Europa. Einer von ihnen ist Amir, ein Iraner. Er sagt, er habe früher in Österreich gelebt, warte hier auf seinen Schlepper, der ihn nach Griechenland bringen soll.
Es gibt viele Boote, aber ob es funktioniert oder nicht funktioniert, nur lieber Gott weiß.
Amir will jetzt nach Deutschland. Im Iran, sagt er, habe er einfach keine Freiheit. Fast 100 Schlepper sollen jeden Tag hier auf dem Platz aktiv sein. Sie versuchen, neu angekommene Flüchtlinge davon zu überzeugen, dass sie sicher über die Grenze schmuggeln können. In einer Nebenstraße finden die Flüchtlinge alles für ihre Überfahrt, auch Schwimmwesten für 20 €. Der Schlepper von Amir will $1.200 von ihm. Amir hat aber nur 1.000.
Ich habe einen fixen Termin um 5 Uhr heute. Wenn er akzeptiert, mit $1.000.
Und tatsächlich, der Schlepper nimmt Amir mit auf eine Reise ins Ungewisse. Und auch wir kommen weiter. Der falsche syrische Pass mit unserem Bild von Karaman Yavuz ist da. Er heißt jetzt Civan Şehmus und kommt aus Amude.
In kaum 3 Stunden war vergangen, ist mein Kontaktmann mit einem Ausweis zurückgekommen, mit meinem Bild.
$600 hat das gekostet, $100 für den Mittelsmann und $500 für den Fälscher. Die Reise nach Europa mit einer syrischen Identität, sie könnte jetzt beginnen.
Story for you. 8 suspected terrorists posing as refugees are reportedly under arrest at an Istanbul airport. It is believed that they were planning to go to Germany from there.
One of the Paris suicide bombers used a fake Syrian passport to get into Europe. Former U.S. Ambassador John Bolton is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and joins me now with more on this passport trade and the dangers of it. Ambassador Bolton, welcome. Good to see you, albeit under unfortunate circumstances here. But tell us your concern here. There's a new investigation out that was done by The Guardian in which they were able to get a Syrian passport in 10 days' time for $250. They also said they could get one in 4 days' time via the Syrian embassy for $2,500. I mean, there's a market for this stuff.
Well, there is, and I think it shows how porous the European Union's outer borders are. particularly at a time as we're in now, where this flow of refugees and would-be refugees out of North Africa and the broader Middle East into Europe has simply overburdened the countries like Greece and the other outer countries that are bearing the brunt of the refugee flows. So the first problem is keeping outside the European Union people who don't have the legitimate right to come in. But then once they're inside, the problem grows even more acute because the Europeans have been trying to do what we succeeded in doing several hundred years ago, eliminating the frontiers between the countries, which means that there are seams in European law enforcement that they have not been able to fill, and it poses a risk for the United States because once safely in Europe, potential terrorists then have even more time to get the documents they need to get inside the United States, which is at that
You bring
point.
up a very good point, and I've been talking about this throughout the show today. I mean, if Germany takes in 800,000 refugees, and we have already heard that ISIS wants to populate these refugee populations with members of their extreme Islamic religious fundamentalist group that wants to embark on this jihad. I mean, how do you ensure that someone who's, how can you ensure that you wouldn't have a member of ISIS basically traveling from Germany into the United States of America at some point?
No, it certainly raises the prospect that they're able to frustrate our own external security and break through and then set up networks in the United States that sadly may be able to do what we saw unfold in Paris on Friday. You know, the German case is very instructive. About a month ago, the Lebanese Minister of Information said that he estimated that something like 2% of all the refugees flowing into Germany might be terrorists. Now, Angela Merkel had said she would open Germany to 800,000 Syrian refugees. That means if the Minister of Information of Lebanon is close to being correct, that's 16,000 terrorists.
Oh, my goodness. Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
I paid $2,000 and I bought a Syrian passport with my photograph in it, a driving license and an identity card. So I was contacted by this forgery expert from the German police force. He asked if he could come and have a look at it. He had been asked to verify documents from some of the many thousands of refugees going to Germany. He said he found this very difficult because he couldn't compare their documents with either a real or a forged one. So I went to visit him. I brought my passport and other documents. He very quickly dismissed the driving licence, not part because it has a couple of spelling mistakes on the back. The ID card, he said, was pretty good, but clearly was a fake. The passport, however, he spent quite a long time analysing it. He said it was genuine. He said, this is a real passport. When I bought the passport, I asked him who was buying them. He told me people who wanted a better life, people who were pretending to be Syrians, but most worryingly, members of ISIS, people who wanted to come to Europe to bring their evil war to us and kill people. Clearly, he was right.
Breaking news, the Department of Homeland Security says 8 Syrian migrants have been detained at the Texas border.
Police in Honduras arrested 5 Syrians who were traveling to the United States with stolen passports. According to police, the 5 men were arrested on Tuesday, November 17th. The group of men were planning to enter the U.S. by land with the stolen Greek passports. Anibal Baca, a spokesman for the Honduras Special Police Force, announced on Wednesday that they were tipped off by Greece about the men's arrival. The 5 Syrians were arrested at the airport. From Honduras, the men reportedly planned to cross into Guatemala and then Mexico before reaching the U.S. border. The passports were stolen in Athens, and Baca said police are currently trying to figure out their real identities. Baca said the men may have been trying to flee war in Syria, adding that police are, quote, not saying they are terrorists. The arrests come as many American politicians express concern over refugees entering the U.S. after the ISIS-led terror attacks in Paris.
Authorities in Honduras say they have detained 5 Syrian nationals who were trying to reach the U.S. on stolen Greek passports. Police say there's no indication yet the 5 have any links to the Paris attacks, and whether these 5 men are somehow tied to ISIS is still a question tonight. Authorities are only saying they were carrying stolen documents.
Over the weekend, Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes, he actually said this.
We're still planning to take in Syrian refugees. We have very robust vetting procedures for those refugees. It involves our intelligence community, our National Counterterrorism Center, extensive interviews, vetting them against all the available information.
Now, keep in mind, Judicial Watch says the FBI has nearly 1,000 active investigations involving ISIS right now in the U.S. And just last month, FBI Director James Comey, he said the following. Watch this.
That group is using social media to try and motivate people to either come to their so-called caliphate, or if you can't come, kill where you are.
The Syrian refugees. Obama wants to resettle at least 10,000. There are now reports from Investors Business Daily. It's really 15,000.
Yeah.
And now reports are coming out. We don't get to pick these refugees.
Right.
Apparently the UN picks them.
Yeah.
In cooperation with the Organization for Islamic Cooperation,
right,
which is a Saudi-based group tied to the Radical Muslim Brotherhood. So
right,
in other words, the UN and Islamists are going to be picking the refugees
right,
that we're going to be admitting to this country.
Right.
Should we
and
allow
Saudi,
these refugees?
Saudi takes nothing. You do know that. They take nothing. Okay, so just to set the record totally clear, they take nothing. We take. And the number of 10,000, Jeff, in my opinion, is nothing compared to what the real number is, because I've heard they want to bring in, Obama wants to bring in 250,000, and that's going to be next. You'll see it step by step. And even in the debate, in the Democratic debate the other day, they talked about 65,000. So, you know, I don't know how it's now 10, but I think the number is going to be 250,000 by the time they finish, and we are insane to allow it to happen. Insane.
Mr. Trump, what do you say to the president's argument, really taunting you, taunting other Republicans? You're afraid of widows and orphans and old men, that we have nothing to fear, that these refugees are being thoroughly vetted, and that this would be a betrayal of our values, that the terrorists, in a sense, will have won if we don't allow these refugees to come in.
Sure. Well, we have an incompetent president who probably, I don't know if he really believes this whole act, but we have a man that is just grossly incompetent. You saw that the other day with his speech, which was talked about all over the world. He was angry at the reporters and the Republicans. He wasn't angry at the people that did the shooting in Paris, but he was more angry at the reporters than the Republicans, and the level of vitriol was incredible. So we shouldn't allow it to happen for a lot of reasons. Number one, you just said one of the reasons. They're not even screened by us to the full extent. They're screened, and I guarantee you we get the least of the package. You have going into other countries. We will, as usual, end up getting the bad end of the stick.
The National Intelligence, the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said ISIS, it's likely they will infiltrate the refugee population. The State Department spokesman John Kirby has said as much. The Assistant FBI Director, the FBI Director James Comey, Michael Steinbach, Mike McCall said, the House Homeland Security Chairman. And here's more people warning that ISIS will infiltrate the Syrian population. Here's what they said.
The concern is in Syria, the lack of our footprint on the ground in Syria, that the databases won't have the information we need. So it's not that we have a lack of process, it's there's a lack of information.
And that obviously raises grave concern as to being able to do a proper background checks of the individuals coming into the country.
Yes.
I don't obviously put it past the likes of ISIL to infiltrate operatives among these refugees.
We can only query against that which we have collected. And so if someone has never made a ripple in the pond in Syria in a way that would get their identity or their interests reflected in our database, we can query our database till the cows come home, but we're not going to, there will be nothing show up because we have no record on that person.
There is some fear that some of these refugees may actually be posing as refugees, but they might actually be al-Qaeda or ISIS terrorists trying to sneak into Europe or the United States. What do you make of that?
Well, certainly that's a possibility. I mean, you can't dismiss that out of hand.
Mr. Trump, if the president keeps insisting, as he does, to take in these Syrian refugees, is he not gambling with the lives of Americans? If Americans die, if what happens in Paris happens here, does he not end up having blood on his hands for not listening to his own intelligence officials?
Totally. It's a total disaster. The people are going to come in. I talked to you about this 2 weeks ago where we talked about the migration, how so many of the people in the migration were strong young men. You look at them. I'm saying, where are the women? Where are the children? We're taking in people. We have no idea who they are. They have no identification. They have no papers. They're creating papers. They're making up papers. And as you say, he doesn't even mention the word. He doesn't want to talk about radical Islamic terrorism. He refuses to say the words. And here's a man refuses to say those three words. And by the way, Hillary Clinton refuses to say the word. She's as bad as he is. But although I'm not so sure about that, can anybody be worse than what we have right now? So you have people coming in, and I heard as of this morning, they're already missing one or two people. They came in and they're gone. They're missing. So I think it's a way that, you know, it could very well be the ultimate Trojan horse. We're going to have to see. Hopefully not. But thousands are coming in, and you mentioned 10,000. During the debate the other night, the Democratic debate, they talked about 65,000. I've heard they want to take in 250,000.
Yeah, but not all from Syria. There are 255,000 numbers over 3 years. They're not all necessarily from Syria, but we don't know where they're coming from. And
we have no idea where they're coming from.
All right, this is a Fox News alert. Paris remains on edge just one day after Islamic extremists with ties to ISIS carried out a massive series of deadly terror attacks. According to reports, 2 suspects in Friday's attack may have immigrated to Europe through Greece as part of the Syrian refugee movement. Now, right here on this program, we have been warning about the dangers of this migrant crisis, as have multiple senior intel officials. Watch this.
I don't obviously put it past the likes of ISIL to infiltrate operatives among these refugees.
We can only query against that which we have collected. And so if someone has never made a ripple in the pond in Syria in a way that would get their identity or their interests reflected in our database, we can query our database till the cows come home, but we're not going to, there will be nothing show up because we have no record on that person.
Joining us now with reaction, the director of Jihad Watch, Robert Spencer, from the Islamic House of Wisdom, Imam Muhammad Ali Alahi, and the president of Act for America, Brigitte Gabriel. Brigitte, I'm looking at a poll a year ago from France. 16% of French citizens support ISIS. The population of France, in terms of the Muslim population, is estimated anywhere between 8 and 10%. We had the controversy of no-go zones, no-go zones, etc. But are we dealing with a clash of cultures, Western civilization, and people that come from countries where perhaps they grew up under Sharia law? Is this now going to be a growing problem here in the U.S. if, in fact, we take in refugees from Syria and Iraq and elsewhere?
It has been a problem, Sean, and the West has been dealing with the war, with the clash of civilization. The problem is the West is refusing to acknowledge the fact that we are at war, despite the fact that our enemies tell us repeatedly, we are at war with you, we are at war with you, we do not like your ways, we abhor your immorality, we abhor your materialism. This is how they view us. At least the people in France were honest enough to express their opinion. We know the same thing is happening in America today. Poll after poll have showed that. And what we are concerned about right now is these so-called refugees that we are bringing are people who are coming to our shores, who do not share our values, even though they are not raised necessarily or born into countries that adhere to Sharia law. But with the uprise of Islamic radicalism throughout the world, they are all experiencing the rebirth of spiritual Islam, of the Islam of Muhammad, and that's what they are gravitating to and bringing to.
I don't think we're at war with radical Islam, and the president thinks what happened at Fort Hood is workplace violence, and these are man-caused disasters and overseas contingency operations, Robert. But the reality is we have a president that won't say the words radical Islam. We have presidential candidates now that won't say it, and their plan is to bring in refugees from countries without any ability to ascertain whether or not they have our best interests at heart or whether or not they buy into radicalism. Why should we take in any of them?
There's just no way. There's no way to tell. We shouldn't take any of them. We should send them all to Saudi Arabia, where there's plenty of room and where they're in complete commonality linguistically, culturally, and religiously. There is absolutely no reason. You know why the Saudis are not taking them? Because they know, and they say openly, that there are terrorists among them. The Islamic State, we should recall, last February, ISIS said they were going to send 500,000 refugees into Europe. That was before the crisis began. In September, one of their operatives said, we've already sent 4,000 jihadis into Europe. And the Lebanese education minister just weeks ago estimated that there were 20,000 active jihadis among the refugees in his country. And it's absolutely impossible to tell the jihadis from genuine refugees, and we shouldn't take even one of them. But the denial, as you point out, Sean, it's universal. The presidential candidates are saying this is not a problem, not a threat, and we should bring these people in solely on humanitarian grounds. We're setting ourselves up for a jihad attack on the scale of Paris, in New York, or Washington, or LA, or Chicago, or all of them.
But that is unfair. Right. That is very immoral and unethical, irresponsible statement, because the refugees don't want to come to the United States. Who caused this problem? You just mentioned Saudi Arabia, a satanic system that is source of providing ideology and might and military and media for ISIS and other terrorists. And look, we are friendly with Saudi Arabia, and we are fighting those who are fighting ISIS. We are fighting Hezbollah. We are fighting Syria. We are fighting Iran. We are fighting those who are fighting ISIS, and we are friendly with the source of this problem. Who is this King Salman to condemn ISIS?
Sean,
and he's a war criminal. He's a war criminal.
Sean,
one at a time.
Sean, people ask me all the time, what can we do to make sure that these Syrian refugees do not come to our country? And I tell them, go to our website, actforamerica.org. We have a petition right now to the leadership of Congress to stop Obama from bringing refugees into the country. Sign up to get our action alerts. We now know that under the law, any community that is going to bring refugees into that community must hold under the law public hearing. We are notifying people nationwide when these public hearings are held, so citizens who are concerned about this issue can show up and express their opinion.
Today we must make this much clear. We are at war. The world was reminded last week that Islamist terrorists are seeking to harm our people, destroy our way of life, and undermine the foundational principles of the free world. The Paris attacks also confirmed our worst fears, that of the thousands of foreign fighters who have gone to Syria and Iraq to join ISIS, some would be deployed to bring terror back to the West. For more than a year, my committee has warned of this growing threat. We launched a bipartisan congressional task force to focus on closing security gaps, both at home and abroad, to make it harder for terrorists and foreign fighters to slip across the border undetected. More than 5,000 individuals with Western passports, including Americans, have gone to fight in Syria and Iraq, and some have already returned battle-hardened and prepared to strike. After the Charlie Hebdo attacks, we traveled to Paris and met with the counterterrorism officials on the ground who have known that Europe was wide open to this danger. And we conducted site visits along the jihadi superhighway from Western Europe to Turkey and then into the conflict zone. Our findings were alarming. This September, the committee's final task force report concluded that we are losing the struggle to stop Americans from going overseas to join jihadist groups. And it announced that the gaping security weaknesses overseas are putting the U.S. homeland and our allies in danger. These worries have materialized. We know that jihadists exploited these gaps to plot and execute the worst terrorist attack on French soil since World War II. The world is now looking to America for leadership and for a clear-eyed understanding of the threat. ISIS is not contained, as the president says. ISIS is expanding globally and is plotting aggressively. In a matter of weeks, it executed major external terrorist plots on 3 continents, destroying a Russian airliner, conducting suicide bombings in Lebanon, and launching a mass attacks on the streets in Paris. ISIS is now responsible for more than 60 terrorist plots against Western targets, including 18 in the United States. Here at home, we have arrested more than 70 ISIS supporters over the last year. That's on average more than 1 per week. And the FBI says that it has nearly 1,000 ISIS-related investigations in all 50 states. If this is not a war, then I don't know what is. America cannot wait for terrorists to launch their next attack. The security of the free world depends on our response, and we must respond immediately. We can start by securing the homeland. Our task force report will not sit on the shelf. We are taking action to turn our recommendations into reality. Soon we will release legislation designed to help close security loopholes and keep terrorists from reaching our shores. We will also work to make sure terrorists do not infiltrate refugee flows to sneak into our country, as some apparently did to reach France. Today we released a report laying out the preliminary findings of a nearly year-long investigation into counterterrorism challenges associated with Syrian refugee flows. The results of this review are sobering. While we are proud of our humanitarian tradition of welcoming refugees into our country, this is a special case. The President's own intelligence and law enforcement officials have warned this committee of the risk involved with the Syrian refugee program in the high-threat environment, and I have to take them at their word. I've called upon the President to temporarily suspend Syrian refugee admissions into the United States until we can improve the screening and vetting process. But we cannot wait for the President to take action. Congress will act immediately to make sure the system is more secure. Americans are worried about the terror threat level, and my promise to the American people is that we are working hard to strengthen this country's defenses. And my promise to our allies is that we stand ready to help you to do the same.
It did not take ISIS very long to declare where it is setting its sights next. Just 3 days after the attacks in France, the terror group says it hopes to attack right here in Washington, D.C. Now, the threat comes in a video that was released this morning that has not yet been authenticated, but it specifically references Friday night's massacre that claimed at least 129 lives. Speaking in Arabic, an armed fighter looks into the camera and says, quote, "We say to the states that take part in the Crusaders campaign that by God, you will have a day, God willing, like France's. And by God, as we struck France in the center of its abode in Paris, then we swear we will strike America at its center in Washington." Here in Washington, there are no visible signs that security is any tighter than it would be otherwise, but we can tell you here at the Capitol there has been an increased presence of U.S. Capitol Police. Though they say there has not been any specific threat on the building, they do want to do that out of an abundance of caution. That's the latest from Washington. I'm Ross Jones for the Now Detroit.
Ross, have we heard anything from intelligence officials about the threat?
There has not yet been a specific response to the video threat itself, but the CIA director today, John Brennan, did say, speaking at a forum here in Washington, that he believes ISIS has more attacks planned, quote, in the pipeline. If they have any more specific information about those, they certainly didn't share them today, though.
And Ross, were there any other targets mentioned?
They did mention targeting, I should say, other European nations in that video. Quote, "I say to the European countries that we are coming," they said, "coming with booby traps and explosives, coming with explosive belts and silencers, and you will be unable to stop us," it said, because today we are much stronger than before.
Wow.
Back to you.
Frightening stuff.